here.
Hi, Susie. So excited. I've just spent this whole day feeling so calm and blissful, knowing that truth and reconciliation work is happening somewhere in some pockets of the world very sincerely, and that it will have an impact. Since we've already started recording, maybe I'll just welcome you, Susie, on behalf of the Truth and Reconciliation Work Week. And we're so grateful. We have about 34 different events, and you've been a presenter with us since last year. And you've chosen a very different theme this year. Last year was around the Balkans, and you've gone into a more generic inward space this time. So all your work is deeply appreciated, and we're so lucky to have you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nilima. And I was just speaking to Juliana, and I was mentioning to her, I said, last year, a lot of the work was on the outside. It was collective. It was about all the war wounds in the Balkans. And I thought it was very important that I carry everyone with me inwards, where I really think the work needs to happen in 2022, because this is a year that very much like 2012, where a lot of portals are open for us to drop and dissolve karma. And therefore, the more individual work that we're able to do on the microcosm, the greater the impact will be felt on the outside. And thus the choice for my theme of work this year.
Everything's always perfect, isn't it? So you're so right, you know. And if we can access these portals, whatever karma we can burn for ourselves, we will also impact our collectives, and therefore the universal collective as well. So just joyful and grateful, Susie.
Thank you so much, Nilima, and a great thank you to you too for finding the power to be the engine behind this work. I know that this is a third year, if I'm right, of the Truth and Reconciliation work. And just this morning, I was discussing with one of my mentees, and I said, you know, given the kind of environment and we are in, which is so deeply immersed into Kali Yuga, and while a lot of us might like to believe that we are on the precipice and about to enter into a better phase, I don't get that sense, because when I look at post-COVID, I don't find a more conscious and a more aware collective. I find the environment is racing towards revenge, consumerism, revenge, commercialization. Everybody's running for holidays. They're buying like there's no tomorrow. They just want to get out there. And so few are turning inwards and remembering what really transpired in the last 2.5 years. And so that gives me a sense that perhaps we're still in the throes of Kali Yuga. And given that, it will need a lot more voices and leaders around the world to take it upon their shoulders to say, okay, let us lead the way and not wait for someone else to make it happen. And I see Truth and Reconciliation doing exactly that. Because in the olden age, we saw that the gurus went from city to city, village to village, country to country, carrying the word. There weren't enough takers, but eventually it gathered force. So I'm hoping that the same will happen as all of us come together saying, we take it upon our shoulders to be the agents of change. So thank you very much for having put this force into motion.
Thanks, Susie, and I'll accept it on behalf of the co-conveners, the WIN organization, Helm of Eight, and Shakti Leadership. We've co-convened this over the last 3 years and hope to get more of you on board as partners who can build this momentum.
Thank you very much, Nilima. I'd also like to thank Juliana, who's from the WIN organization, and she's really helped me in putting this thing together today. She's offered me this space, and she's been doing the behind the scenes work, and I'm really grateful to her for this.
Thanks, Susie. It's wonderful to be here.
So if it's okay with everyone, should we just dive forth? And those that who haven't been able to join us right away may miss bits of this, but since we are recording it, they'll be able to revisit it and come back to what they've missed. A lot of people are familiar with the term self-love. I thought I understood it. Until very recently, I realized how little I knew about the word itself. And there have been many life insights that have really come together for me since the beginning of this year to make me truly understand not only what it means, but how much courage it takes to delve into it. In the year 1999, in April, we took a trip to Missouri. I met with an earthquake, 6.7 on the Richter scale there. I didn't think I'd survive it. The next morning, we thought we were rushing back to the comfort of home. And on the way, we met with a terrible car crash where I had my near-death experience. But this is not about that story. Although I must mention that I have just returned from Missouri and dared to take that trip after 23 years. And that was an act of self-love because I knew I had to overcome the trauma that I had accumulated. And as we go through today, you'll understand why I use the word daunting practice of self-love. But what I wanted to refer to was when I had that near-death experience. After a few days of coming back into my body, I found that the contraction and the containment in the body was so very difficult for me. I felt trapped. I felt it was a prison. There were often times when I would cry and tell my mom that I don't want to be in this body anymore. And she'd get very disturbed by it. And it was only now when I look back on that experience, I understand that when I left my body, there was such a tremendous expansion that coming back into it and being aware of that expanded state and then the contracted state was something that every soul encounters at the moment of conception, when it makes the choice to descend from the great power into this earth plane. What it's really choosing is from expansion to contraction and containment. And that experience of embodiment, that birthing experience itself, when it crosses dimensions, brings with it such tremendous fear of the containment because you're knowing that you're going to lose that feeling of being expanded. And if I speak of this in everyday language, whenever we have feelings of confidence, joy, love, ecstasy, you'll find expanded state. And whenever we are feeling fearful, it's contracted state. And so at a feeling human language, if I were to say, the soul knows it's going to go from love, the expanded state, to fear, which is the contracted state. And you can see why anyone will not want to descend into fear. It feels like moving from the heavens into the hells. And we're choosing it. And that is one of the reasons why they say that embodiment on the earth plane is such a difficult choice for a soul. And I also want to emphasize this for all of us here. Wasting a single breath in not doing what we came here to do means that we are choosing to be contracted repeatedly, life after life, and we're choosing to move from heaven to hell, life after life. And do we really want to do that, is the question. A few days ago, as I was lying on my yoga mat and I was stretching and I was doing my asanas, I had this immediate insight that while it was easy for me to stretch, it was really difficult for me to relax the body. And in that moment, I understood that returning home to the place of peace, to that loving state, is something as a soul we are unable to do. We know how to stretch. Once we are embodied, we know how to go about doing things. We engage with life, we get busy, but we forget how to be. We forget how to come home to ourselves. And so this is the second fear that the soul engages with. It knows that I will not know how to expand again. I will come from expansion, contracted into the body, but I may not know how to feel expanded in my bodily state when I encounter difficulties. It's a bit like saying, I know how to breathe out, but I don't know how to breathe in again. So any task is actually incomplete if we do it, but we cannot go back into the relaxed state of being. And very often we'll understand this in our daily lives. We get worked up and we get stressed and we get anxious and we get panic attacks, but we don't know how to come back into this state of restfulness. And that is the second challenge. But any action is only complete. A whole breath is complete when you breathe in and breathe out. A whole day is complete when there is daylight and there is night. An animal understands this because nature is designed like that. So when it has a cortisol experience, when a deer is being chased by a lion, it goes through the adrenaline pump. But then when it is safe, it knows it shakes its body vigorously and it comes back into a state of calm. It returns home to its centered space. When we encounter danger or we feel unsafe, we get wound up, contracted. We don't know how to relax back into our state of love or state of home. And so these two insights then bring me to the definition of what I think or what I've learned self-love is. If I look at self-love as a noun, it is the experience of being at home in myself in an expanded state where I feel this is a safe haven. I am safe here. I belong here. There is comfort and there is a rootedness. I'm anchored in my body. I'm anchored in my home, in my family, in my community, in the world. And when I look at it as a verb, then self-love is the motivation and the effort that is required to conquer all my subliminal fears. And now when I'm speaking of fears, can you see how even before you're born, you first have the fear of descending from the great power, from expansion to contraction. You then encounter the separation from that bigger thing, whether you give it the name of God or divinity or source or nature or whatever you want to call it. But that separation, the pain of separation is there. And then let's look at what happens when it goes through the four prisons of distortion. And these are the four prisons I'm going to talk to you about. Prisons that you will have to break out of in order to love yourself. The first prison is parental wounding. That started at conception. At conception itself, there is a fear that the incoming soul has. Is my mother going to accept me or not? Does she want me or not? Does she want to abort me? Does she want to keep me? Is she happy about my arrival? And that consciousness is listening to every feeling, thought, emotion the mother is having. And what happens where in the large number of cases, the mother's fear of acceptance is linked to the gender of the child itself. So if the mother is fearful that my family will not accept me if I don't produce a male child, you can imagine what is already happening to an incoming female fetus. So that fear all the fears related to conception. Then there are fears about, was it a conception of love? Was it a forced conception? Was it a rape? Was my father drunk when he put his sperm into my mom? All of those things. The consciousness is aware. And that is wounding at the first degree. Then, after that is containment fear. As a baby's body grows, the womb is becoming tighter and tighter, less and less space for movement. And can you imagine what that will be like? How many of you have been in a closed lift and felt terrified? And you just want to run out. Can you imagine containment fear coming from the womb space? And the next is, oh my God, imagine how much hard work this little thing that hasn't even been born yet has to struggle its way through the birth canal. And what if it gets stuck? What if the mother stops pushing? Or what if the baby tires out? So you can see the way nature has designed this, descending into earth in itself is such a difficult, fearful task. And while science may have different reasons about saying the baby cries to exercise its lungs, I think, it may be a sign of relief. I finally made it out of the birth canal. And oh my God, if I've already been through so much pain while still in the womb, being nourished by my mother's ecosystem, what's going to happen when I get out there and I'm all on my own? And then we come to, because there is the fear of separation. So now this infant is seeking something to attach to, something that is larger than itself. And who is that something? Is the primary caretaker, that's the mom. And therefore, when the baby needs something, when it's crying because it wants to be soothed and it's not picked up, when it urinates and it's not cleaned up and put back into a fresh, comfortable, dry nappy, when it's hungry and its hunger call is not answered and it's not given nourishment, when it is cold or warm, but its temperature is not regulated because it doesn't have any climate control mechanism, it needs the mother, either her body, the warmth of her body, or it needs to be snuggled. And most importantly, out of all of these things, when it is anxious because it's an alien planet and it needs its nervous system to be regulated, and there is no one to regulate it because children cannot regulate their own nervous systems. They depend on the mother's nervous system to ground them and to regulate them and to soothe and comfort them. Now imagine if the mother is either angry because she hasn't slept nights or there's too much pressure at work or a whole host of reasons why she cannot provide this comfort to this baby. What does the child feel? Unmet needs makes the baby feel really scared. It's just been through this really difficult, daunting journey for 9 months until birth. And now its needs are not being met. It does not know how to survive. It does not know how to regulate its nervous system. And so what's going to happen? It starts feeling completely helpless, scared for survival. The fear amplifies, and it may feel anger at the mother because this larger thing was supposed to take care of me just as I was taken care of before I descended. And I didn't have all these feelings of helplessness as a soul or spirit. And then it cries for attention. There's pain. And when that is met with either anger or not showing up by the mother and the baby is just left crying, or the mother gets angry, or the mother is violent, or the mother is irritated because this child is tuning into, it is still divine essence. It's tuning into her psychological state, tuning into her emotional state. It's picking up all of these angry vibrations or tough touch by the mother. It understands the mother is angry, and then the anger towards the mother is turned inwards and the child becomes angry with itself. And when that happens, it becomes alienated with its own self. The fear becomes really wide. And here we have this issue of the mother wound developing. I'm too bad to be loved. At a being state, I get identified with not good enough to be loved by my mother. So you can see that as soon as we are born, we have a problem which CEOs of big companies may not have the ability to solve, which is, how do I ensure that this thing that's supposed to be bigger than me, this thing that's supposed to love me, this thing called the mother, how can I make this mother love me? How can I become lovable? An infant is confronted with this problem, right? So I want you all to take a few moments, because everything that I'm sharing with you today is, I want you to take it back with you, and I want you to start reflecting upon this very personally. Ask yourself, in what way was I unable to find safety and comfort with my mother at birth or in my infancy? And was it because I felt neglected, rejected, abandoned, unloved, unwanted, or any of the others? Just take a few minutes to identify for yourself. There may be some of you who are saying, I had a perfect mommy, I have no problems. I just want to mention to you that your wound is buried the deepest, and you'll have to do the most amount of digging. The others may have felt some of these things as they were through their growing years, either neglected, rejected, abandoned, unloved, unwanted, any of these. This is how your being identity was created. And even if you can't assign it to the mother right now, but if you have your own life script or narrative where you feel neglected, rejected, abandoned, unloved, unwanted, you now understand where the source of it might be. So we're going to do backward integration and try and figure it out. And I'll explain to you why it's so complex for you to not be able to link it to your mother. That's a really tough one in the parent wound, in the mother wound. So as you're all doing this, I'm going to move on because I have a lot to share with you today. The mother wound or the parent wound, and I'll come to the father wound very soon, is a primal wounding issue. Trust me, you're going to take several years uncovering this, working with it, because it takes many layers of work. And I want you to remember that it has nothing to do with the mother. Listen to me carefully, I'm going to repeat this. It has nothing to do with your mother. So don't waste your time blaming her. But it has everything to do with your experiential interpretation of what caused that wound. This is your work. This wounding dynamics is a carry forward from the experience that you have chosen based on some samskaras of past lives, even though it may not feel that way in your present life. But I'm giving you this clue simply because many people waste very many years getting stuck in the trap of blame. No, you chose mom. She's the perfect one. She was supposed to deliver that experience to you because it is somehow linked with the work that you're meant to do in this lifetime. Now, as you grow older, and we're still talking about ages 2 and 3, you learn to move your body, you suddenly learn you have arms and legs and feet, and you can walk and you can roll over and you can do things, and you can imagine what a miraculous experience that must be for a little baby. A baby who until now all it could do was feed. And therefore you start craving the approval for your newfound power. And this time you're looking to the father figure. The child's sense of I can do this seeks approval, attention, and validation from the secondary caretaker, that is the father. If the father responds with, don't do this and don't do that, and there is domination, then the child develops self-doubt. You're not sure of yourself. Hey, but I just discovered this power. Should I not be exercising this power? Is this wrong? And so it tries a little more. It tries to break a few rules. It tries to explore. It wants to be seen and heard. And then if it is punished, it starts blaming itself for upsetting the father. But what it does do is loses its autonomy. And it continues to crave for acknowledgement. But it starts feeling powerless. And repeated encounters with the father either being missing, and being a missing father will mean nobody is there to approve of my newfound power. Nobody is there to acknowledge me, to see me, to tell me, hey, you can do it. And so it starts believing, I am unworthy. I'm not capable of doing anything. It's not safe for me to exercise my actions. I lose drive. I lose the trust in myself to do things in the world. And then it tries to hide. It likes to believe, I do not exist. I don't deserve to exist. And here the father wound develops, which is the next problem the child has to deal with. How can I become worthy? Because my experience of dealing with my father makes me believe that I'm pretty unworthy. I'm powerless. I do what I shouldn't be doing. And therefore it drops its ability to do things, to take initiatives, to go out there and make a difference in the world. It develops self-esteem issues, etc. So if you see, the mother wound gives you the sense of belonging or not belonging. The father wound is on which your self-identity is built as far as your worthiness is concerned. It is your what I'm capable of doing in the world. How powerful am I? Can I lead or must I always follow? It's your doing identity. And the mother wound defined your being identity. So all issues connected with worthiness, lack of autonomy, power, these are coming from the interpretation of the wound with the father. And they're all fears, if you notice. The first one is a fear of not being loved or not belonging. The second one is a fear of not being powerful enough, not being able to express itself, not being worthy enough. And you will have to work through these fears because this will keep you in the contracted state. So first, the descent is difficult. Then we find the conception is difficult. The in utero experience is difficult. The birthing journey is difficult. The mother wound is difficult. The father wound is difficult. And guess what? We are just barely 2 or 3 years old. That's human existence. So now I want you to take a few moments to just reflect on ways in which I felt unworthy of my father's approval. And some suggestions could be he was always absent, he was an authoritarian, he was too dominating, he was disapproving and critical, he was a strict disciplinarian and was rule bound, so I could not break rules or any others. Yeah, Gauri makes a mention of how dynamics between the parents can affect your sense of worthiness. And that is right. The relationship between the parents can also wound you. But I'm not going into that dynamics because that is a secondary wound. I'm still talking about primary wounds because otherwise we'll all want to check out of life and say, mujhse nahi hota hai. Can't do this. It's too tough. We may be wounded by both the mother and the father, but you will find that one wound will always predominate. And so a simple way is to ask yourself, do I suffer more from the feeling of being unloved, or do I suffer more from the feeling of unworthiness? And just because you're a huge achiever or you've accomplished much in the world does not mean that you don't have the unworthiness wound. You might just discover that it's a way in which you camouflage the unworthiness wound, and I'll be coming to that shortly. Now, let me just tell you what is the difficulty in acknowledging these, because some people who may be just thinking that I don't have any problems with my mom or dad, I usually say that they're the ones who need to do the deepest work because they are not attuned to their wounds. And to be able to journey home, to be able to come back to the state of, I accept myself, I am willing to love myself, I am willing to own my power, I have to work through these parent wounds. But there's a challenge there. To start with, I will believe that I'm inadequate or I'm bad. That is the wound. Now, if I accept that maybe my parents could not offer me safe space, it makes my parents bad. And if that be the case, then I must be very, very bad to disrespect my parents and to think that my parents are bad, because then I'm pointing a finger to my parents, and parents are only subordinate to God. That makes me an even more bad child. And therefore, I'm a sinner. And so what do? It's easier for me to repress my complaint with my parent about not providing me safe space than being a super bad child. That's your parent prison. But there's only one problem. You can't unlock yourself from this prison, because if you can't feel it, you can't release it. You have to be able to get in touch with the anger you feel with your parent to be able to release that anger. So what is the task? If you are to learn to love yourself, you need to learn how to feel the anger without acting it out with your parent, without going into rage and wanting to do things that will hurt them. This is responsible experiencing of the anger with the parent. You then need to process it, and you need to release it from wherever in your body you stored that. And you need to then go into the insight that perhaps my parent also had a fearful body and mind, and therefore could not offer me the space because they don't have safe space in them. So how can they give me something they don't have? And then allow this insight to depersonalize the experience, which until now feels like my parent is to blame. Depersonalize it. Disown the fearful labels of I am unlovable, I am not good enough, I am inadequate. Forgive your parent and learn to step out of these labels every time the mind is going to remind you, because it's a habit deeply entrained, and your mind is often going to come up with, but you're so unlovable, but you're so unworthy. You can't do this. You can't do that. That parent voice is going to echo in your head, and you have to recognize this is my parent's voice, not my true potential, not who I really am. This is part of the distortion, the way I experienced life, the way I have interpreted it. So getting out of the parent wound is the first step. It's the first prison you must unlock yourself from to be able to love yourself. And that brings me to the second prison, which is the two problems that you were supposed to solve. How do I get my parent to love me? And how do I get them to think that I am a super champ? I'm worthy. These are survival patterns that I will develop then to be able to feel good enough. And the way we develop our survival patterns is to manipulate the life force energy inside of my body to feel safe. And a lot of these, we're going to discuss the 5 survival patterns. While I'm talking about them, please see which one you resonate with, because usually we employ 2 patterns. In very rare cases, you may employ a 3rd pattern. So you have your go-to pattern, you have your backup pattern, and sometimes, in rare cases, you have a 3rd pattern. So in the first case, when I find angry mom or angry dad or absent dad or missing dad, whatever, where this thing who's supposed to be larger than me is not showing up and providing me safe space, I do some things to deal with the terror that I'm feeling in my body as a child. And that has stayed with me till today. We are all doing that. Each one of us are doing one of these 5 things. The first pattern is called the leaving pattern. What you do here is you limit contact with whosoever you're encountering discomfort with. You may leave the body. That's your first go-to. Or if you can't leave the body for some reason, you may leave the situation or vice versa. Such people feel very unsafe on earth. And I'm one of them. Many times I'll have people who come to me and say, I don't belong to this planet. I feel I'm from another planet. And this is a lot of us that are using the leaving pattern, staying out of the body. They disown the body and they move their energy out of the body. So very often you might find yourself when you're becoming uncomfortable in your room, say staring into space or into the distance, or focusing your attention on something else that's peaceful. It could be the chirping of a bird outside a window or whatever else. But what this does is it fragments the psyche. And because you're too sensitive, you're psychologically tuning into people. They don't have to open their mouth to say something to you. You're reading their energies and you know too much, and that information is just coming at you. And this can sometimes lead the key emotion that you struggle with, or such people struggle with, is self-hatred. Because you know what? I didn't even want to come into this body. I was really happy out there in the spirit world with the divine, with everything was so beautiful there. So leaving pattern is the first survival pattern. The second pattern is called the merging pattern. Here you expect other people to meet your needs. Or there's something called the compensated merging pattern, where you actually turn around and say, I'll come solve your needs. A lot of healers and a lot of rescuers, they fall into this merging pattern. Their problem is they can't nurture themselves. They can take great care of other people, but they don't know how to nurture their own needs. So you can see huge deprivation, huge longing, never feeling full enough. They move their energy towards other people. So they'll be the one who'll go, please, mama and dad. They'll be the good children. They'll do whatever it takes to get the parents' attention. They like to save others, but the problem is they're going to reject their own needs. And so they always feel needy. They are never, never, never full enough. And there are many of us, ask yourselves, do I always feel there's this deep void inside me? Nothing seems to fill it. I feel so empty on the inside. And mostly these people, the key emotion they're going to struggle with is shame. The third pattern is called the enduring pattern. What this person does with the energy is it pulls all of its energy, pulls it deep inside, right into my core and further down, and it hides. And it's a bit like if there is, if there is a bombing happening, a sky bombing happening, and you run and sit into a bunker underground, they do that. That's how they receive the parents' not so kind energy coming at them. And so that becomes a pattern. They'll just endure. They'll hide inside. They will resist others, but they turn against themselves because I was not able to defend and protect myself. Their problem is they can't express. So they will suppress all their feelings. They will not say anything, but they will feel very hurt inside. They will want to rebel. And often such people have felt humiliated because when they wanted to express their autonomy as a child and say, see, dad, mom, this is what I've done, they were told off for doing those things. They are moving their energy downwards. So leaving pattern is just leaving right here from the top of the head and going back into the spirit world. Merging is moving towards the other person or the parent or whosoever you wish to please. This is the enduring pattern where I pull the energy right in deep inside of me and I hide inside. So I'm hiding myself. I'm resisting others. I commit self-sabotage. And the only way I know how to deal with the world is passive aggressive. And Simran says, can we have more than one pattern? Simran, I mentioned that a little earlier, that most of us have two patterns. In rare cases, we might use a third one. The vulnerability here, of course, is such a person is going to fear expressing themselves or taking action because they know they're going to be criticized, they're going to be humiliated. Such people also tend to procrastinate and sit on things. They will not act. And if you find that that's a pattern, you know where it's coming from. It knows how to follow, but it does not take the risk of leading. And they're dealing primarily with guilt, the core emotion. The fourth pattern is the aggressive pattern. Here, this person moves its energy, gathers all of its energy, moves it up, and throws it out at the other person. It rejects its own needs. It idealizes power. It's power hungry. And the way it learns to survive is by domination and control. If I can be bigger than my parents, then I can control them. The distortion is this person depends only on themselves. They do not trust anybody else. Active aggression is the way they feel safe, but they also deny their own needs. They become powerful people. They accomplish a lot, but they feel very, very alone because they don't trust others and they can't ask for help. And the key emotions that they deal with is anger and ridiculing others, because that's how they feel safe. And the fifth pattern is the rigid pattern. Here, what the individual does is it pulls all of its energy and contracts it and holds it like a column inside of them. It just contracts themselves. It relies only on rules, doing things the right way, rejects its own intuitive experience, and is completely rule-bound. They follow orders to the extent of being inauthentic towards their own needs. They chase accomplishment. They shut down their emotional bodies. They will become over-intellectuals. They will use words, not feelings, may be dogmatic and critical. They're unable to trust or access their own intuition. And often their issue is that they will blame themselves and say, if anything goes wrong, I am to blame. Now, the thing is, whichever ones you've identified as your pattern, and we are all in pattern. As long as I'm in pattern, I'm fearful. Because I'm in pattern, because I'm not feeling safe. I have to get out of pattern to overcome the distortion, to start feeling safe in my own body. And so when I'm feeling triggered and when I'm moving into my pattern, which is either leaving, merging, enduring, aggression, or rigid, whatever I'm doing, I need to become aware of it. I need to recognize I'm in pattern. I need to go to my center of essence at my heart center and say, who is watching this pattern? Can I rest in my heart center? Can I come back home? Can I step out of pattern and now interpret the situation, what is really happening here? And then perhaps I can learn to accept and love myself. But I'm never conscious because I'm always playing out the pattern. And that means I'm always fearful. And so where is the question of self-love? And that brings me to the third prison, which is fearful body. All the past fears, not just from, I've spoken about from the moment we descend conception, but now I'm going to go a little further back and say all past lives. All those fears are stored as samskaras, as imprints in my soul. We haven't closed the loop on them, you see. Like I said, we know how to start things, we don't know how to finish them. You remember the example of the deer being chased by the lion? We know how to get wound up cortisol. So all past fears, if I was killed by somebody in a war, I may have died, but I carried the fear onwards with me in my body, and I'm going to bring that fear into this body. And I'm not going to complicate this by adding the layers of transgenerational fears, the baggage of all my grandmothers and grandfathers, but that is the truth, but that'll get too complicated. So I'm just keeping it simple, me and my past lives. I have brought that all with me. And yesterday we had a beautiful session with Nilima and Dana Mariam. And she shared, she's the author of the book, The Untold Story of Sita, and she was talking about how she had these spontaneous regressions. And she said it was in this lifetime that she regressed to a life 300 years ago. And when she felt the rage that she felt against Aurangzeb, she physically wanted to go to his grave and spit on him. It was so extreme, the anger. She was coming in touch with her anger after 300 years and several lifetimes. And I'm quoting this only because it is evidence of the fact that we carry these samskaras in us because they're unresolved. And so we are going to come back lifetime after lifetime if we do not resolve the fear that is in the body. I started out by sharing today about my car crash in 1999. And I have just returned from a road trip to Missouri. It was daunting for me when my husband suggested this. And my first response was, no, not going there, because the trauma was so intense inside of me still. And then I sat back and said, time to deal with it. I will take the road trip and we will not fly. We will take the road. And I did this for the first time after 23 years since the crash. It was primarily to deal with the trauma in my body. And we had some very amazing experiences, uncanny experiences on the drive back, because not by design, but by universal plan, we encountered identical situations to what had happened in 1999, which would really creep me out and bring the trauma to my surface, helping me to release it all. And that's because I do not want to carry this trauma into the next life. And let me tell you a little bit more about this. When I was quite young, I think I was in my early teens, and I visited some cousins, some relatives, and there was a talk about someone they were referring to who had met with a car crash, and the baby had the windscreen on her face. While the story is being told as a 15-year-old, I felt all of that and I knew I was going to encounter it. That memory became active in me. And I was in my 30-something when I met with the car crash. I was on the co-passenger seat and the entire windshield was in my face. And that just proves to me that this was an unresolved trauma from a past life. It was still in my body. I had to repeat the experience. I had to go through it. Having understood this, and which is why I'm sharing all of these things with you, because bad things don't just happen to us because that's resolution of karma. It is also resolution of fearful imprints and samskaras in our bodies, which we have the opportunity to give up, because without doing that, we cannot expand. We will stay in the contracted state of those fearful emotions. And learning to love yourself means learning to face your fears. And so how do you know that you have fear in your body? So I'm going to start with some really simple ones. For example, feeding impulses. Do any of you do emotional eating? When I'm really scared, when there's too much stress, when there's too much tension, do you go to food? You know what you're feeding? You're feeding the fear. I'm not dealing with the fear, but I'm feeding the fear in that moment. Some people do the reverse. They don't eat. They do crash diets. They will deny themselves nourishment and nutrition. They will starve themselves. They will stop eating when they are stressed. Again, that's terror in the body. They're used to starvation and they're getting in touch with that. I don't deserve food. And there are others. These are all feeding impulses. There may be others who are suppressing or neglecting hunger. How many of you will skip meals when you have a deadline or a project to deliver, and you realize at the end of the day, I missed my breakfast, I missed my lunch, I just survived on coffee all day? And what does that tell you about your relationship with yourself? Or what may have happened to you on a feeding impulse with your mother as a child? How you treat your body is telling you a lot about how much fear you have in your body. This is feeding impulses. Let's come down to urinating. If you've had a history of bedwetting, if you've been told that as a child that was happening, bedwetting was the result of unresolved fear. You may have the reverse problem, which is holding it in. I will not go to the toilet till I find a clean toilet. If it means I have to hold it in for 3 hours, I will do that. And then as I age, incontinence is experienced and we blame old age for it. But it's not old age. We've been holding it in for our whole lives. And when the muscles get weak, they're getting weak because that's where the trauma was. We don't want to lie as a child in a wet diaper. And so we learn to hold it in. Or my mother got angry because I was wetting my diaper too frequently. There is some history of fear there. Examine it. So if you have a bedwetting history, or you have a tendency to hold too long, if you do not respond to the call of nature, a lot of people have a similar problem with constipation. What does that tell you? Constipation or any IG problems with the gut is holding fear in the stomach. And reflecting that there is a tendency to not let go. So coming back to, we are not completing the task, because the task is breathing in, breathing out. I've been hurt or I'm aggrieved. I've collected it. I'm holding and feeling powerless in my stomach, but I will not let go of it. I will not forgive. I will not move on. Then there is something a little more complicated. These ones we relate to more easily is called body armoring. And because body armors become part of who we are, we don't notice them. But if you have, wherever you have aches and pains, that's part of your body armoring. If you have headaches and if you have shoulder aches or the neck hurts, then you know that you're crouching. It's natural. You feel fear and automatically your shoulders are going to move, but you don't know about them. And then you're holding your muscles tight continuously. Some people hold it in their stomachs. Some people hold it in their jaws, in the neck, in their backs, in their arms, in their legs. That is all body armors. And trust me, I had to develop my own form of yoga, which I'm calling the rock and roll yoga, because I had to literally put my body onto the yoga mat and I had to roll it on the earth to be able to dissolve all of these tight muscles and dissolve them and open up the knots and teach my body to not be armored, hypervigilant, fearful, scared. And we all have body armors. If you identify what you're most prone to, if you're prone to headaches, you'll know where your body armoring is likely to be. Or if your legs hurt a lot, if your back hurts a lot, that is a clue to teach you about which part of your body muscles or musculature you need to learn to relax. We knew how to tighten them up. We know how to go into that state of fear. We don't know how to relax back, and that has become a permanent body armor. Then there are issues of boundaries. When we have weak boundaries, we gather a lot of other energies inside of us, and it becomes present to us as confusion, brain fogging, tired, fatigued. And particularly, this is for those who have the blending pattern, because they'll be over empathetic towards other people, not realizing that they are denying their own needs. But the net result is that you collect everybody else's traumatic energies in your auric field. And you need to learn to flush your aura out, clean it up. Because now your own fears, plus a multitude of other people's fears, and it's not just other people's fears, but you'll find then the spirit world and those fears, and you're carrying all of that alone. So the amplification of fear that you're carrying becomes enormous. And then people who feel ungrounded, shaky, nervous, unsure of themselves, unsteady, feeling I don't belong here, they have trouble grounding. And therefore, learning how to discharge the overwhelm energy, discharge this feeling of I don't belong, learning to engage with the earth, find safe ground, learning to trust and drop your dead weight into gravity. That becomes the exercise to release fear. People who have the leaving pattern have a key issue with not feeling grounded. And then, of course, there's embodiment, which is, again, the leaving pattern people who are very often you'll be in a meeting and you'll find your consciousness has drifted off somewhere else, or you're speaking to someone and you're only half there and half somewhere else. And you've got used to just being half there all the time because you're not in your body. Every time something difficult happens, you move out of body. And there is a great need for you to learn to own the body, make this a safe home. The issue is you are fearful to even exist in your body. But without the body, you can't own your power. And without owning your power, you can't claim love of self. And therefore, it becomes really, really important that to feel at home in your body, you recognize where all in your body you have frozen fear. And then you start melting or thawing that fear, learning to release it, to relax it. And a simple way is just feel your body. See which parts of your body are hard, not soft and gentle. Tough. Where have you toughened? Where are you knotted up? What parts of your body get tight when you are anxious or feeling stressed? Do you have perfect flexibility in your body? And what do we tell ourselves? As we age, it's natural not to be flexible. That's not true. As we age, we have gathered so much more fear in my body. A baby, it takes nothing for a baby to pick up its toes and put it in its mouth. Can you pick up your toes and put them in your mouth? We can't do that because our bodies are trapped in fear. But if we can learn to dissolve those fears, your body is going to become flexible again. It's like dough. Freshly kneaded dough is so pliant, but you keep the dough out for a day or 2 days and it becomes hard as rock. And that's what fear does to us. Love keeps us flexible and pliant. Fear makes the body locked in completely. So that's the third prison that you need to release yourself from, which is fearful body. And the fourth prison is the fearful mind. Now, this can be a very vast topic, but I'm going to try and give you some very simple ways that have been of extreme help to me. Identify and release 3 sets of beliefs. The first one, what makes you feel that the world is a hostile and unsafe place? All beliefs about the world is not a safe place for me to be in. And right now, you can see with the amount of trouble out there in the world, a lot of us can feel very unsafe. There's wars, there is viruses, there is declining stock markets. There's all sorts of things happening in our world which can trigger us. A great way is, of course, to dissociate from all news. But the important thing is when I meet people, when I go out and engage with others, do I have trouble asking for things? Or do I feel safe to have my needs met? And that'll give me an indication of how safe my world seems. Next is what makes you believe that others want to harm you. Every time we think that I will not speak to so-and-so because they're going to judge me, or they may be rude, or they may be mean. Where is that thought coming from? We may not even have spoken to them, and yet, very simple thing I find is that, especially when the kids were younger and you went to a restaurant and you asked them to, okay, why don't you place the order for the meal today? And the kids will just shrug and say, no, Mom, you do it. What are they feeling? They're feeling unsafe because what if they say something to the steward and he barks back at them? And you have to remind the children and say, he's not going to eat you up. Try it. Express yourself. State what you need to. So in what ways do you feel that others are going to come and harm you? I felt that with the car crash because we were stopped by a tractor trolley in the middle of the road. We were then escorted to a village medical facility. And while we were there, the cars were stripped and all our belongings were taken away. A few days later, when I was going through all my plastic surgery, I met a parent whose 18-year-old boy was struggling with coma. Exactly the same spot they'd met with the car crash, in exactly the same way. It was the way the people of that village used to earn a livelihood, by arranging car crashes to feed their stomachs. Now, when you have an experience like that, you can start feeling pretty unsafe in the world. But just because it happened in the past does not mean it's going to happen again. And if I carry it with me, I'm going to have to go through this experience yet again. So any one of you who've had difficult experiences in your life, I am inviting you and urging you to find the courage to dissolve it, to breathe out, let it go, and to be able to embody yourself back in the space of comfort, peace, belonging, safe anchoring in yourself. And the third thing you need to release is a set of beliefs where you want to hurt others, or you want them to suffer because they've done bad things to you. Now, very often these are unconscious ones because we repress them a lot. And I can tell you what I do. When I have a not so kind thought about somebody, I usually confess to my husband. And what I find is the confessional act allows me to dissociate with that feeling and to take a more compassionate view of what I'm feeling, and allows me to dissolve it. There is a huge power in confession. Choose someone who you know will not judge you, who you feel safe with. If you're having a terrible thought about someone, that's the first thing you need to do. The second thing to do is say out loud the following words. Even though I want something terrible to happen to so and so, I am declaring that I do not want to activate this desire. Because you're using your intellect to intercept that spontaneous or that instinctive feeling inside of you. And you're making sure that you don't energize it, you don't manifest it, because you are using your wisdom mind to intercept it. And the third thing that you need to do is that very person that you want harm to come to, you have to start blessing them. Not because you're feeling magnanimous, but because you've just realized that you have a violent tendency in you. And you need to heal your own violent tendency. And the antidote to my violent tendency is blessing. So these three things will help you become free of a fearful mind. Then you need to manage anger. This is very important because suppressed anger, we may not feel it, but we are vibrational creatures. We are energetic beings in protein bodies. We're going to broadcast it to the world. And which is why I started with the parent wound, because the source of your worst rage comes from the parent wound. Or if bad things have happened to you, if somebody's harmed you. Those terrible things, both these two things need to be worked with, because any anger that is suppressed, you may not experience it, but you're projecting it and you are broadcasting it into the world. And part of all the terror on the planet and all the terrorist acts on the planet, you are feeding that and contributing to that. So you have a personal play in every war that's taking place because you fed it with your anger. Instead, find the courage to engage with your own repressed anger, feel it, process it, dissolve it. Forgive yourself, forgive the other. And anger is anger, whether it's turned outwards or turned inwards at you, both are equally bad. So you need to work with both. The third is send blessings to people that you dislike. Now, this may not be that they've done something terrible to you, but you just have a dislike for some people. Start sending blessings to them, because like I said, we are energetic beings. Your dislike is being picked up by their energy body, and they are going to send arrows back to you, and the subtle energetic war is going to continue. And you have to put an end to it. We have to end this invisible battle that is happening all the time. And blessings allows me to cultivate my compassionate nature. I also need to dissolve all negative curses. I know curse is a very powerful word, And we are all going to turn around and say, I've never cursed anyone in my life. But what is a curse? Curse is the opposite of prayer. Have you ever prayed for anyone, wished that they would get okay? So when you're feeling very angry with somebody, what do? Usko pata chalega tab, he will know. When something similar happens to them, they will know. That's a curse. You're wishing something bad happens to them. Involuntary acts of anger, where we want terrible things or hurtful things or harmful things to happen to other people, we need to stop dissolving them by first recognizing this does happen to me sometimes. I'm human. I respond on instinct. I have likes and dislikes. I'm still not free of what is called raga dvesha. And as long as there is fear, I still have karma to dissolve. So very important to dissolve all curses I'm sending out, because they're going to come back to me. That's the law of karma. Disengage from all competition and competitiveness. Now, this is a tough one because, we're always telling our children to do exceptionally well, compete. We're competing at work. We're competing with siblings. We're competing with so many people. But that competitive spirit is giving rise to the fear of losing, to the fear of loss. And we've got a win-loss mentality. Somebody's got to lose. And then you can see why countries are pitted against each other, because somebody's got to lose, right? Somebody's got to be more powerful than the others. It all starts with us personally. Disengage from competitiveness. Choose collaboration. They sound like just words and they're buzzwords, and we've all heard this statement, but trust me, practice it. Use gratitude as an antidote for jealousy. How many of us actually accept that I'm really feeling jealous of so-and-so because they've got X, Y, Z? Our ego mind can be so clever, It can tell us, no, I've never felt jealous. I have so many people telling me, I've never felt jealous. We're humans, okay? We're not supposed to be perfect. It's all right for us to feel jealous, because if we can recognize it, we know what antidote to use to heal ourselves and bring us back in the state of love. Jealous is fear. I will never be able to get what he has or she has. And as long as I'm fearful, again, I'm not in my expanded state. And then, of course, practice letting go. So important. We don't know how to let go. We start something, we don't know how to end it. On the earth plane, we are on a planet of duality. What we've got to start, we've got to end. If we start with hating someone, we must end by having a loving attitude towards them. And I don't mean that you go love them, but I mean loving enough to forgive them. Then I'm free and I'm off the hook. Otherwise, I'm hooked forever. If I'm jealous, I must be able to reach the point of gratitude and being content with what I have. So you can see how we have to close the loop. Anything that we open up, which is fearful, we must return back to love. Anything that contracts me, I must know how to return back to expansion. Because the only one who is remaining perpetually trapped is me. And then I cannot love myself. And it's so important to cultivate the power of acceptance. Yes, I have likes and dislikes. There are so many things in my life that may not go according to me, that may be troublesome, that may be hurtful. But if temperance is what is going to bring me to even keel, then I have to learn to let temperance dissolve all my past samskaras, strong likes and dislikes. And that only comes through acceptance. Yes, I'm living in the now. This situation is happening with me. Am I going to live in a state of fear? Or can I find a way of returning to my expanded state of acceptance? It's here. What can I do about it now? So the can do, what can I do about it now? So the absence of fear is love. And this is what I've been trying to explain in the last hour and 15 minutes. And expansion is only possible when you're free of fear. And as you can see, fear is something we enter into the moment we decided to come into human form and descend onto earth. We're going to journey through fear all our lives. And the only daunting purpose of our life is, to what degree have I reduced the fear in me when I exit the planet? What have I overcome? Because if I don't overcome it, I'm going to repeat it. And then we call that recurring patterns. But those recurring patterns happen because I didn't finish what I started. So I may have started something in this lifetime. It remained as incomplete samskara inside of me, and I will finish it in another lifetime. Do we really need multiple lives to finish the same thing? If we do become aware beings, if we do want to return to the state of love while we are in the body, because you know that we cannot do this work when we are disembodied. You can't do this in any other dimension, which is why they say that taking human birth is such a blessing, not because it's an easy journey, because you have the opportunity to complete what you started. Now, the choice is yours, whether you want to complete it in this lifetime or you want to repeat it through several lifetimes and come back years and years later. So that's all that I have to share with you today, and I'd be very happy to take any questions. I know that there were some comments or questions while I was sharing. Juliana, can I just request you to take a look if there's something that I need to address that's already been put as a comment on the chat, then we can take that on first. And after that, we can open it to all of you to ask any questions that you might have.
Yes, I'm taking a look now. Simran Aurora asks, can we have more than one pattern?
Yes, I answered that. We can have, most of us have two patterns, and in rare occasions, we might go to a third pattern. We always have a favorite one that we go to first. If that doesn't work with the other, then we'll move to the second pattern.
Very nice. And Gauri also commented that this is exactly the conflict. Parents have their own experience which affects us, but there is a notion of there being the highest two, the conflict of humanness, leaving nurturing.
Juliana, that went by very fast. I didn't grasp it, sorry.
Just Gauri comments that this is exactly the conflict. Parents have their own experience which affects us, but there is a notion
Yes.
of there being the highest two, the conflict of humanness, leaving and
Absolutely.
yes.
I agree with Gauri.
Yes. And Priya R wanted to know, how do I express my anger without blaming my parents for how I feel?
Okay, so this is a very important question. How do I process my anger without acting it out in responsible ways? So Priya, one thing you can do is bring to mind what you're angry about, and then to be able to release it from your body, you can use active engagement, which is you can beat up a pillow so that you have movement. The moving allows the frozen parts to move, the frozen anger to move out of your body. If you find that useful, or you can stomp your feet on the ground, any part of the organs of action, hands and feet, beating them or stomping, this is one method. Another way, some people like to listen to emotional music, and they like to be moved emotionally, and then they want to cry and let it out through their tears. You may want to write letters and express your anger in a letter, and then tear the letter up. Please don't send it to your parent. So you have to work actively with, actually, what is it? It is a frozen energy, negative charge in your body that needs to be released. And you can try any of these methods that I've mentioned to be able to release it. And like I said, the problem is not what the parent did. The problem is how we engaged with our woundedness at that moment. And so we shouldn't be blaming the parent, because if we look at their childhood, you'll probably find that they they also were not provided safe space, and therefore they don't understand this concept of safe space, and they have so much fear in their own body and mind that they can't bring it to us. It takes a very conscious parent to be able to provide that safe space to their children. And then, like Gauri mentioned, the relationship dynamics between the parents can sometimes also frighten the children a lot if there is either violence or if there is a lot of arguments in the house. So safe space in Kali is a very profound concept, and I think we all work towards it. We will be able to offer it to our children and grandchildren going ahead.
Wonderful. And Dr. Saj Dougal says, so final solution is to love every living body would be in a way of loving ourselves. How will that diminish fear of being rejected or remove insecurities?
So Sahaj, you can't love another if you don't love yourself. So I think this is a very outward approach. I think you have to overcome your fear. Absence of fear is your true nature anyway. We are loving beings, but we've had all these layers of fear. So please work with the fear. Please work with the distortions in your mind. Loving another is not the objective of our inner work. It's impossible for us to do that. We don't know the experience of love because we're in contracted states. When we are expanded, we are naturally loving. You'll notice that when you're feeling very happy, the day you're feeling very happy or very high, you're naturally in a loving state. So work on your fears, on your contracted state, and that will make you naturally loving towards others.
Wonderful. Selene Lim also asks, how effective is sound or meditation therapy?
All therapies are very useful. But I think it's very important for us to know exactly what we are targeting in us. I personally believe that our work must start with the emotional body. When we do a lot of meditation practices, and there is still a lot of hostility inside of us, it's like applying a Band-Aid on a wound. So what happens is we feel peaceful for those few moments when we are sitting in meditation, but we don't carry that meditative state out into the world. We can be triggered and we can snap back at people the next moment. So work on your woundedness, work on your destructive emotions first, because the more you start dissolving those, you will be able to activate the prefrontal cortex, which is the place where the brain really naturally expands into sharing, giving, compassion, support, love, all of those things. It is not going to happen sitting on a meditation mat. Because that's sometimes, and very often I find that happens, it's spiritual escape. Because I feel peaceful, it becomes another survival mechanism. It becomes an escape from the fearful reality of my inner storm.
Wonderful. And Komal also asks, are there any solutions for undoing rigid behavior?
Well, the core issue of the rigid type is that we don't access our intuition. We only give emphasis to rules and accomplishment. And therefore, turning your attention inwards, learning to do the work inside, studying my inner landscape by asking simple questions daily. What am I feeling? What do I think about this? What do I feel? What do I think? What do I want? Because you see, people in the rigid pattern only reference rules. They don't reference themselves at all. So start referencing yourself.
And we have an extended thought from Gauri, which is that our beliefs are also the cause of fear. We just turn them around and break patterns, isn't it? And he also feels that we're not trained to communicate with ourselves or with others. Once we know we are meant to be love and peace, we need to work on communication.
Yeah, so impression derives from my inner state. If my inner state, and this is what I have really been trying to express all through today, can you see how fearful we are in our minds, in our body, in our spirit, in our whole experience of embodiment on this planet? Where is the question of being loving? Unless we work with the fear, the work is with the darkness, it's not with the light. The problem is we think, let's be loving to others. I don't even know what that word means, because if I'm in a contracted state, can I know what it feels like to be in an expanded state? I need to be in the expanded state to know what that feels like in my body, in my mind, in my soul. So just turn it inwards. Work on your destructive nature, your destructive habits, your destructive emotions, your destructive thoughts. And then naturally you find sweeten your tongue, because speech is such an important aspect. If I want to, and that's why I spoke about curses, I spoke about all those things because I'm making the reference to speech or thought, intention, all of those things. So yes, work on everything that is destructive in me. And trust me, we have that destructive self inside of me. The ego mind would like to believe, hey, I'm such a nice person. I've not harmed anyone in this lifetime. Why am I encountering these experiences? How about we sit down and say, there is a destructive animal in me. It comes alive. It's sometimes there is this werewolf. I want to meet that werewolf and I want to befriend it. I want to understand it. And then maybe I want to transform it into its original nature of being a loving cub. But you can't transform the werewolf without meeting it, can you?
I think that about covers it. We have a lot of thanks and good wishes otherwise. Lots of reflections and good feelings.
So it's been such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. Some of you know this, but those who don't, you can access my book on Amazon worldwide. It's called The 7 Karma Codes. And that can help you journey through some of these things that I've spoken about. I also have a YouTube channel, which has over 100 videos on various topics, some of which I've spoken about. And that's a free resource. So just go to Susie Singh on YouTube. And if you find anything that calls to you or that's useful, you're very welcome to engage with that resource. And if you'd like to, follow me on any of my social media platforms, I'm Susie Heals on Instagram and I'm Susie Singh on Facebook. Join me because I tend to share a lot of useful material that I'm hoping someone will need and want to hear. And I'm sending you all loads of love. Thank you so much. I really value and appreciate that you took the time to be here today. And that to me shows that you have the greatest and deepest aspiration to overcome your fears and to engage with your loving nature. And so be it.
Thank you very, very much. That was truly amazing. Question.
Suji, can I have a question, please?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, I had to break in between for some time. My question is, Suji, how as parents we ensure that, we create a culture wherein we don't fight and the child doesn't feel insecure, because, this has happened quite sometimes with me and my husband. Normally it's quite common that we do have fights, and which at one point of time made the child very, very insecure, So, what exactly should be done in that case, that particular case where that kind of a thing happens, and it does happen.
Okay, so who's attending this session today? You are.
I am, yeah.
Okay. Can you take the responsibility to not engage in destructive dialogue with your husband? To be able to find peaceful ways of interacting with him to overcome and resolve some of the things that are troubling you about your relationship. You see, we have to take the onus and the responsibility for becoming the change agents in our family. When we start engaging with dissolving the fearful mind, with dissolving the destructive habits, and using more compassionate ways of engaging with the world, you'll find that automatically your ecosystems are going to become more peaceful. And of course, we are always going to say, my husband's the problem. But that is your karmic opportunity. That disturbance, that suffering, that difficulty is presenting itself to you so that you can overcome something in your own samskaras that can allow you to create a more peaceful environment. So can you take personal responsibility for that? And I have videos on my YouTube channel. You can access them, how to speak to the others so that they will listen to us. And recently on my Facebook also, I've just finished a series on our relationships in marriage and how to make marriages work. It's on my Facebook. You can listen to those too. And I keep doing a lot of these talks. So if you will just follow me on social media, yes, Komal, it's on my Insta handle is Suzy Heals, SUZYHEALS. So please visit these. This is an ongoing work. This is a life's journey.
These are on YouTube as well, all these topics that you talked about?
Some of the topics are on YouTube. I have about 100 videos there. Some are on my Facebook page because when they will be shared there when I do talks on other platforms, then they upload them to their YouTube, but the links are all there on my Facebook page.
Sure. Thank you.
So I'm sending you enormous blessings to all of you. May you all find your peaceful nature. May you all engage in the peaceful warriors battle and journey to your true nature and essence of love. God bless you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you.